Very good. Okay. So, Be'ezrat Hashem, we're continuing now the Pirush of the Malbim. We're Perek Dalet, and we stopped last shiur with the Pirush Pasuk Yud. Pasuk Yud. And we spoke about the stressing of the Malbim, according to the Malbim of Shlomo HaMelech, to bring down the spiritual journey and connection and intimacy we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the lowest level of a human build-up, right? So on an intellectual level, it's the Sechel HaMa'asi, the practical intellect, versus the analytical intellect, like the Rambam calls it, the Neshama. So we're bringing it down to the lowest intellectual level possible, but also to the what is called the Koach HaMit'orer, the instinct, where all the midot reside. And through that, the person benefits the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or the expression of the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that gives him, we said, the ability to develop more emunah, right? And that emunah triggers more revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through nature. This is where we're at. So, if you will, right now, we addressed until now the work Shlomo HaMelech did in order to bring, if you will, this spiritual phenomenon to a more intellectual and emotional dimension, right? And it's obviously very different and distinct, the connection that is spirituality versus emotional and intellectuality. And he comes and continues and he dives in. And he says, after we've addressed how Shlomo HaMelech was able to transform something spiritual into something intellectual and emotional, Shlomo HaMelech comes and says, you have to take it now one darga, one level even deeper. Because there are three ways we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the mind and the heart. You serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the speech. And you serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with actions. Actions being the furthest from the world of spirituality. Dibur, speech, the connection between the two, as we spoke about a few times, and the mind and the emotion, which is more metaphysic, yeah, more psychic. So we continue now with Pasuk Yud Aleph, and now he's going to explain how Shlomo HaMelech was able to translate something spiritual and turn it into Koach HaDibur, into speech. How did he translate that experience in his speech? How did he consolidate it on that level? The pasuk said, "Nofet titofna siftotair." The sweetness is dropping from your lips. Kala, my bride, my beloved, my kala. Devash v'halav ta'at leshonech. You have honey and milk under your tongue. Ve'reach salmotair, and the scent and the smell of your dress is like the scent of Lebanon, is like the smell of Lebanon. Says the Malbim, there is a major difference between Safa and Lashon. Okay? Safa is a language. Lashon is the literal translation is the tongue, but it also means a deeper version of the tongue, the speech, the content of the speech. So, like we said, what is your mother tongue? It's what is your instinctive language, right? But you can speak different languages, but there's only one mother tongue, right? So we see that language is more superficial than the mother tongue. Good? Says the Malbim, this refers to two different layers of Avodat Hashem, two different dimensions of Avodat Hashem that we have, that is connected to the mouth, to the speech. He says, the siftotair are sweet, your lips, right? Your language, your safa is sweet, my kala. Says the Malbim, this is referring to the tefillah. This is referring to the divrei Torah, to the singing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meaning, there has to be a language that is exterior, not so deep, not so instinctive in the person, and that's called tefillah in Torah. Le'olam yiyu be'einecha kehadashim. Chachamim tell us that when you learn Torah, it has to be fresh and new in your mouth all the time. It cannot be moldy, it cannot be old, it cannot be systematic. Chachamim also say, Lo ya'aseh adam tefilato keva. Don't make your tefillah repetitive. Don't make it mizrat anashim melumada, something that just comes out robotically. No, it has to be fresh. It has to be new. There has to be a life. There has to be life. There has to be something new. And the only way it will be new if it stays superficial inside of you. It doesn't sit in you in a place where it's just robotic. Good?
Can you explain that concept of staying superficial? What does that mean?
Okay. Okay, very good. Most people, when they pray, they say the words so fast, so systematically, that they are not in touch with the meaning of the word, and it's not coming from an awakening, an emotional or a spiritual awakening that creates that wording. What is it? Does anyone really mean the words? No. Why? Because it's engraved within the person so deep that it comes out naturally. So comes Shlomo HaMelech and says, when you pray or when you learn Torah, it cannot be from that depth within you. Vadai, from the emotion, it has to be super deep, but it cannot be so systematic to the point where it's just flowing as if you're reading a newspaper. Worse, because the newspaper, you don't know what you're reading. Right? So he says it has to be almost, it has superficial, not chas v'shalom superficial in the sense that it is superficial. Superficial in the sense that it has to be new. It's sitting fresh. And the reason it has to be like this, so that you dive into your essence, find the inspiration, find the motivation, and infuse in those words a neshama, an interest. Right? Every Amidah you do, every Tefillah you do is completely different. Although you say the same words, but you're in a different place. Your focus is different. Your request is different. The intonation is different. You're going to stress different berachot at different in different times every day.
How could the request be different if you're saying the same berachot?
Because when you ask for parnasa or you ask for refuah, you can ask for refuah to stay healthy, and you can ask for refuah to bring Hashem, for Hashem to cure someone. You say the same words. But sometimes you're going to say, thank you, Hashem, keep me healthy. And sometimes you're going to, Hashem, please send refuah shelema to this one. You said the exact same words. But the brain, the heart, the focus, the intonation, sometimes everything is great, is Baruch Hashem perfect, and your beracha of Chonen HaDa'at, of Rofei Chol Amo Israel, you know what, is on autopilot. I don't even pay attention to it. But you know what I'm going to focus on? Barech Aleinu, Shema Kolenu, on something that's pressing at that moment.
And feeling it in your heart and thinking it in your brain is enough to request it the proper way?
It is the ingredients needed to be able to request it the right way. When I was in yeshiva, we had a siha from my Rosh Yeshiva. And in the world of yeshivot, you have a contrast between the Rosh Yeshiva, who's teaching Gemara, the brain, analytical, and the Mashgiach. A Mashgiach Ruhani in Yeshiva is someone that teaches Musar. He doesn't teach Gemara. He has to be a big Talmid Chacham, etc., but he doesn't teach Gemara. He teaches Musar. He's going to teach Mishlei, he's going to teach Mesilat Yesharim, he gives inspirational speech. So one time, my Mashgiach told us a story that there was a Mashgiach that was focusing only on Teka B'Shofar Gadol. Mashiach, bring Mashiach, bring Mashiach, bring Mashiach. And that was his focus the whole time. When he was, everything was perfect, but the big kavanah was Teka. Teka B'Shofar Gadol, bring Lanu, bring Mashiach. So the Mashgiach, it's a little bit of a wicked joke, huh? But he said the Mashgiach, what does he do? He has a salary. He comes to yeshiva, and he teaches students how to be happy. Musa. So he doesn't have any burdens, financial burdens. So what does he pray for? He prays for Mashiach. But the Rosh Yeshiva, he has to go, he travels, meet this one, meet that one, raise this one 10,000, this one 5,000, this 100,000. Where his mind is? His mind is in making sure that the bills are paid, pay the mortgage. So the Rosh Yeshiva, he focuses on Barech Aleinu, right? While the Mashgiach focuses on Teka B'Shofar Gadol. Okay? It's bringing out the point that depending on where your heart is and where your responsibility is and where your focus is, it fluctuates, right? But this is what makes your tefillah vibrant. This is what makes your tefillah real, actual. It's of actuality. It's living that moment. You're infusing in your tefillah all your emotions that you're feeling at that moment. Now you can only do that if your tefillah is fresh at all time. If you infuse your emotion in your awareness when you do your tefillah. But if it's autopilot, we have 8 minutes to finish minha and arbit. The words that are coming out, they're coming out from a place that is very deep, very engraved, but there's no meaning to the words.
Why do you think we have a script to love and to request these things from Hashem? Like if you think about it from like a parent-child relationship, Imagine your father came to you and gave you a script of what to say to him and what to ask of him.
We asked that question in the past. You asked
I
me that.
remember asking it and I forgot the answer. That's why I'm repeating it.
There is the script, okay, is in order for everyone to be able to connect in their own ways. If we would each have our own script, okay, you would not be praising or asking Hashem the right way. You would be like a child. Today I need this, tomorrow I need this, tomorrow I need it, right? Where if you have a structure, the structure of request, if it is really a request, and we dived into it at the time that it's not really, it could be a request, but not according to everyone. According to Rabbeinu Chizda Mikraskes, it's not really a request. It's just connecting to the pipe of bracha that is floating and just bringing it down. So it's not like I'm asking, no, Hashem blesses and showers the world. And it's a structure to go and tap into that beracha and just channel it where I need it. So the words is the mathematic or the alphabetic formula to tap in to different source of berachot that are there in front of us that we just need to connect to. A child goes, Daddy, I want this, Daddy, I want that. This HaKadosh Baruch Hu did put in place a dependence dynamic so that we can stay connected. But the formula of the tefillah is the formula that was put in place by Chachamim to be able to tap into what's out there already. So the formula can be like a dead body, or it could be a very lively and vibrant and sparkling body.
It's like cooking with care and love, or just making the recipe.
Exactly, or yeah, make it without taking it and put it in the microwave, press plus 30 or whatever it is, and then that's it. Exactly. So say Shlomo HaMelech, your tefillah and your Torah should be the safa, should be outside, like the lips, right? They're outsiders. When it and this is and this is the sweetness. This is what is sweet. This is what is sweet.
Rav.
So this is the sweetness that comes out from tefillot and Torah that has a neshama to it. It's sweet to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what is sweet attracts. What is sweet appeases. What is sweet creates comfort, attachment, unity. So we want Hashem close to us. We want to be sweet in Hashem's taste. Your tefillah has to be fresh and real, and your Torah has to be fresh and real. However, devash v'halav, when it comes to the honey and the milk, tahat leshonech, this has to be under your tongue. Says the Malbim, honey is a byproduct of the flower. It's taking the pollen and turning it into honey. Halav is the byproduct of blood that becomes milk that is extracted from the animal. Good? Says the Malbim, we have two extractions, one from vegetable and one from animal, that are originally unconsumable and that become suddenly not only consumable, but very healthy and enriching and loved and almost like a necessity. He says the devash and the halav are the te'ameh HaTorah, the te'ameh HaMitzvot. It's the pnimiyut, the depth. It's what you understand from the Torah. It's what you bring out. It's the lessons you learn from the mitzvot in depth, right? He says this, it's only Torah. It's the byproduct of the Torah, the byproduct of the tefillah. He said the byproducts, lessons, knowledge, deeper understanding that you create from the text, that you bring out from the text. This should always say, this has to be anchored deep, like the mother tongue. This has to say penima inside. So on one end, my Torah will be fresh, but what I learn from it, I will anchor it, right? Drive it down deep, deep into my nefesh. Why do I have to do that? Because it's only by installing it deep in my nefesh that it becomes spontaneous. That's when halacha, that's when an understanding of the Torah becomes part of you and changes your behavior and upgrades your personality. Ve'reach salmotaich, and the smell of your dress is like the smell of Lebanon. He said the dress, what is the dress? The dress is the most superficial thing, right? It's the actions. So we spoke about the machshava last shiur. We just addressed the speech, two types of speech, safa and lashon. And then action is like a dress. The dress. Your actions is what is seen by all, is what defines you in the eyes of all. It's your behavior, your physical behavior, the way you present yourself, what you will do. It's the Tov Shem to a certain extent. Who is this person? Well, you can only identify the person really, if you don't know them deep, deep inside, by their action. The guy does this, right? What do you do for life? What do you do in life? So the person will tell you, I'm a banker, I'm a businessman, I'm a this, I'm a that. No, I'm Eved Hashem. So the actions will define superficially who you are. And this is Ve'reach salmotaich, and this is what brings out the smell. This is what will push people away, a bad smell, or attract people to you, good smell. Your actions. Your actions will determine whether you attract good or attract bad, depending on the smell. If it's a bad smell, it will attract zvuvim, it will attract flies. If it's a good smell, you will attract good people, refined people, right? So Shlomo HaMelech comes and tells us, this is how you consolidate and crystallize your spiritual connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all the way down to practicality, to your mundanity. And we address this many times, the way you speak, the way you eat, the way you dress, the way you sit, etc., etc. And now, Pasuk Yud Bet, Shlomo HaMelech goes back to the overall.
Sorry, before we just continue on that note, why do you think there's such a struggle with so many people to toe the line between presenting yourself well, being, representative of Hashem, and then not being tied to materialism, right? Because it's such a fine line. And then you find some people just go all the way one way or all the way the other way.
I think it's a point of reference to the shallowness or the depth of identity of the person. If a person is shallow, he will need to identify himself by his physicality, by physical things. If the person is deep and well constructed inside, he will use it as a tool, not as an identity. So when you see people that are very superficial and it's all about the look, then you know they're empty inside. And that's what they need in order to identify themselves, to value themselves. A person that is rich inside, he's going to be very proper, you can be very presentable, and with the finest, but that's not what determines who he is. I told you so. Someone told me actually it's Andy's fault. My first Hermes tie, Andy gave it to me many years ago. Blue and white in his house. At the bank. At the bank you give it. At the bank. And so I was wearing it, and somebody told me, if you can, I was careful with it. Hermes tie, you want to be careful. Yeah, you go, you eat. So the person told me, if you cannot get it dirty, don't wear it. So that's what it is. This is what it is. That's the difference.
All right. Is it a means to an ends, or is it the end?
Exactly. Pasuk Yudbet, Gan Naul, the closed, right? The locked garden, Ahoti Kala. You are my bride. My garden is the garden is locked. Gal Naul. The fountain is locked. Ma'ayan Hatum, and the spring is sealed up. Says the Malvin, this is going back to the overall nefesh. And he says, how do you protect now such exposure of your spiritual, very intimate connection to the outside world? It's a tremendous vulnerability. What is important to you, you keep very private, right? You don't want to brag it, but yet you need to be able to be firm and strong and proud enough to bring it all the way down to that level so that you get infused 100% from that connection. But the moment you take the spirituality to a practical level, now you're accountable for the flip side of your actions. So psychologically, it's easy to split between your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu when you're learning, when you're praying, and ideologically, and your actions, right? And say, you know what? My actions, I did a mistake. I'm doing teshuvah because I'm spiritually connected. But when your actions have in it HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so every action you do, you're saying, okay, am I using Hashem right now or I'm not using Hashem? Very different. Very different. So comes Shlomo HaMelech and says, okay, and now how do we secure that level of connection on such a low level, right? In the human buildup. So he says the Gan has to be Na'ul. Your nefesh has to be closed. What does that mean? It has to be closed? That nothing can penetrate unless I open myself to it. I don't allow any outside influence unless I think it's good. So I will have a layer of protection and define based on who I'm seeing, where I am, at what time, for what reason, whether or not I should open up and express, open up and act, or keep my distance and stay protected. Gan Naul. Gal, the fountain is the Torah, right? The fountain, Naul also. When it comes to your Torah, when it comes to your Chokhmah, when it comes to your knowledge, same thing. Now, it's not only actions, it's what you're learning. This also, I don't expose myself to something that can come and disturb. I don't want to have to see images that I have to carry later that will contaminate my mind. I don't want to hear ideas that will end up contaminating me. Gal Naul. Naul. Ma'yan. The spring. The spring has to be sealed. There's a difference between something that is closed and something that is sealed. Something that is closed, you open and you close. It's made to open and to close. But a seal, once you break it, you cannot put it back. It's like the seal of the Kohanim in the shemen of the menorah in the Bet HaMikdash. The whole story of Hanukkah. The moment you break the seal, it's finished. The Malbim says, a person has to carry the seal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the identity of Hashem. He is representing Yud Ke Vav Ke. He is a seal of what? Of the Ma'ayan. The Ma'ayan is the spring, the water that's coming out of its own. It's the infusion of the Neshama. It's the flow that keeps on coming down, right? It's always bubbling, always sparkling, always reviving. The Neshama has to be sealed. It has to have the Chotemet, the seal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because when you break that seal, finished. You cannot use what's inside. It's no longer Kadosh. It's no longer Tahor. And says the Malbim, this is the Kedusha and the Tahara. The behavior of a person, Bekedusha ubetahara, is what protects the Neshama. It's the seal of the Neshama. What is Kedusha and what is Tahara? To be Kadosh is to find the holy purpose in your behavior. To be pure is to have the conviction and the determination not to do the wrong thing. Two different things. I am determined not to do the wrong thing. You're tahor. You're pure. You see holiness in every action. You see Akadosh Baruch Hu in every action. You are Kadosh. This outlook is what protects the influx of neshama flow within you. So we have addressed the practical work that we have to do mentally and emotionally. We have addressed the approach we need to have when we do tefillah, when we learn Torah, versus what we learn from it internally. And we've addressed the impact our actions have in our surrounding, the smell. And finally, how do we protect this? By being very careful on what we expose, who and to what we expose our actions to, what we allow to penetrate when it comes to our intellect, and what do we see, what purpose do we have when we behave, when we act, kadosh, versus tahor, which is the conviction to do the right thing, not to do the wrong thing. This, says the Malbim, is the secret sauce Shlomo HaMelech reveals to us to retain HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our actions, in moving the hand, in eating, in walking, in talking, in thinking, in smiling, in reacting, in dealing, negotiating. This is the secret.
Rob, so perhaps it's a silly question or simple one, but so Tarat HaMishpacha is like, in order to get the influx, is like basic.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's impossible. You cannot have an influx of neshama in a vessel that is tameh. I'm asking you a question. You bring the finest wine, finest wine. Are you going to pour it in a cup that's dirty, that has that dirty and that hasn't been washed for weeks, sticky, smelly? You're going to pour the finest wine? Mapito, never. It's a waste. When there's no taharat mishpacha, when nida is not respected, the vessel of the person is a dirty vessel. Hashem cannot pour the wine there. Impossible. He cannot pour neshama in. Enough to do teshuvah, enough to open your eyes, enough to stay alive spiritually, but that's it. Who wants that? I want to enjoy the most finest wine. I want to be able to drink it. I want to get high on that wine. Pasuk Yud Gimel. Shelachayich, your limbs, pardes rimonim, are fields of pomegranates. Says the Malbim, he's insinuating a little bit what the Sforno says. Shelachayich is the fields that usually do not produce so much. Is your midot, your mitorer, your instinct, your body, right? Things that don't really produce any spirituality. However, yours, Shelachayich, pardes rimonim, It's a field of pomegranates. It's full of mitzvot, like the 613 grains in a pomegranate. Yours is a source, an incubator of mitzvot. In peri meganim, and luscious fruits, good fruits. You have a big variety of knowledge, of experience, of chokhmah, of Torah. It's within you. In peri megadim. Kefarim in neradim, full of henna and nard, right? So here he says the Malbim, Shlomo HaMelech introduces two scents. The sense of the taste, the pomegranate, peri megadim, fruits that you eat, and the smell of the henna and the nard. He says, if we look at the Bet HaMikdash, and we look at the avodah of the Bet HaMikdash, there was the korban that was consumed, and there was the ketoret that brought out smell. Who was consuming the korban? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The fire would come down, and we consume the meat, and be elevated by the smell. Like we say, et korbani lahmi leishai. You bring my korban lahmi, my food, on my fire. HaKadosh Baruch Hu consumes, eats, and smells what we bring to him. The Akuzari says, this is why we smell and we eat. When you eat and smell with mahshava, with the thought of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you elevate what you eat and you elevate what you smell. Says Shlomo HaMelech, after all this, suddenly you smell Hashem. Suddenly you taste Hashem. You don't eat bread, you eat Hashem's that's in the bread. You drink wine, you drink Hashem that's in the wine. It's a tremendous level. At that point, there is zero tolerance to eat kosher style. There is zero tolerance to it. It just doesn't, it's not possible. Because I don't want the tasteless food. I want to taste Hashem. This is the impact that intimacy has when Hashem is in your action. And he says, Hashem shows us what's important to him, the taste and the smell. Because this is what he uses when he comes down. The fire is the neshama, consuming the meat, eating it, and elevating it himself through the smell of the ketoret. And the smell, Pasuk Yudalet, we have the nerd, the kinamon, ned, harkom, kaneh, vekinamon. That's 4. Atze levona, the trees of levona, is 2 because the minimum of plural is 2. Mor va'aholot, im rashe besamim, the head of the incense, which is another 2 because it's plural, we have 10. Says the Malbim, Shlomo HaMelech is referring to the 11 essences, the 11 ingredients of the ketoret. But we only have 10. Where is the 11? He says the 11 is the helbona. The helbona was very bad smell. He says umum and bach. Umum and bach, we said. There's no mum. There's no deficiency in you. So Shlomo HaMelech comes and tells us, suddenly you start only smelling the good things. HaKadosh Baruch Hu only brings to you good taste, good flavors. Who do we know was blessed with such an attention and such a protection and care from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik was carried from the well all the way to Egypt in chariots of perfume sellers. The Midrash tells us, Chachamim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu cared for the tzaddik and made sure that along in his way, he only has good smell.
Didn't you tell us it was like 1% chance, not even, like that path was like all horrible smelling carriages?
That's right. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of the tzaddik. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of himself. Because if he resides within you, you are him. And if you are him, he takes care of himself. The pashut, simple. So suddenly you're not going to eat bad food. You're not going to smell bad smells. Hashgacha pratit. Phenomenal hashgacha pratit. Nisim. Huh? Now we see how the emunah translates into something that's so simple and so obvious that it needs to happen. But it's a nest. And that's how you trigger it. Pasuk Tedvav. After we spoke about the mitzvot and the Torah, Ma'ayan Ganim. Now you irrigate. You become an irrigator, like the Ma'ayan, like the spring, to the different gardens. Be'er Ma'im Hayim, you're a source of life. Your water brings life to people, revive people. Venozlim, and they come down the river from Lebanon. They come from all the way from Lebanon, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from your neshama. Suddenly now the impact is that you bring life to people, you irrigate people, you refresh people, you bring hope to people, you bring clarity to people, you bring inspiration to people. And you're a spring that just keeps on irrigating. You build people around you. You motivate them. You give them the ability to flourish on their own. Just like an irrigating system that springs the water everywhere for the trees to blossom, for the flowers to come out. And finally, Shlomo HaMelech screams, Ori Tzafon, the north, wake up, awake, and come to Teiman, and come to the south. Come the south, come. We're addressed that the north needs to be triggered, the north needs to be awakened versus the south. No, the south is always there. The south just needs to keep on coming. So we address the Gaon Mivilna that says there's a difference between the north that represents the Beracha, that you have to trigger all the time, that you have to awake all the time, versus the Chesed, which is the south, that is always there. You just have to direct it towards you, but it's always here. Without the Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nothing can exist. The Beracha, up to you to work it. It's there, but you have to bring it. Says the Malbim, Uri Tzafon. Now we have psychologically, Uri. What is Uri? It's a commandment. Wake up, awake yourself, right? Boi, come, a commandment. He says, the way to refresh this constantly is to send commandments, orders within yourself from the neshama to the mitorer, to the instinct, to the heart, and tell it, bring out the good, bring out the good, do good, chesed, be a source of beracha. It's almost a way of self-conviction, right? Where you self-motivate yourself by commanding yourself to behave a certain way. Ori tzafon, be beracha, ve'ehyeh beracha. Be the beracha. Don't wait for the beracha to come. Be the beracha. Be the chesed. Afi hirani, blow in my garden, right? Refresh the love, refresh the desire by sending commandments. You're telling you're triggering the wind. This is the emotion. Afi hirani, the wind has to come and blow. Yizelu besamav. The smell will spread. This is the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the motivation, the teshukah, the desire. This is what awakes itself when you command yourself a certain behavior. So a person asks you, how do I love Hashem? By commanding yourself to be beracha, by commanding yourself to be chesed, obviously based on everything we have said, where you love Hashem. It just wakes up. It's just an emotion that wakes up. Suddenly, you want to serve Hashem. You want to be more proactive. You want to be outgoing. You want to do more. And this, suddenly, you are food to Hashem. Hashem wants to come to your restaurant and eat. Suddenly you become you become the Cipriani, the 3-star Michelin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the top restaurant. I only go there. Everything you eat there, the best. You understand do you understand what that means? HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses to want. He wants to taste you. He wants to be with you. That's how the Malbim, Baruch Hashem, concludes the 5th perek. The 4th perek. B'sha'at tova mutzlachat.
Amen.
And thank you.
Amen.
Mazal tov, mazal tov.
Mazal tov.
Another perek, Baruch Hashem, b'ayin hara.
What do we say after each one of we finished the books in the parasha? Chazak.
Chazak
v'nitchazek.
Ashkenazim say, Chizku v'yametzelav kol ha'miyachalim l'Hashem. No, Ashkenazim say, Chazak v'nitchazek. Sephardim, Moroccan, to say, Chizku v'yametzelav kol ha'miyachalim l'Hashem.
Amen. Amen.
Beautiful.
Amen.
Love you, Rav.
Love you.
Love you guys.
Beautiful day.